about the history of piracy, what modern piracy kind of looks like for stealing movies and TV shows and that sort of thing, and then dive in on a vulnerability piracy stack. I'm Nicholas Anastasi, like Will said, hacker and director of technical operations at Sprocket Security. And then JP.
This is going to be very interesting. Yeah. JP, also hacker at Sprocket Security. No other fancy title after that, but...
So we've got a couple slides of stuff we like. I hope somebody recognizes something up there, maybe. Star Trek usually hits at some point, but and then JP has one.
Any of these? Maybe there's something wrong with you, but please talk to me after. So.
And you can watch a drive really quickly.
Yeah, if we wait here for 3 minutes, it's the whole movie. But nah.
Awesome. So I'm sure this is not going to be new to a lot of people, but just in case, I'm going to talk about the rise and history of media piracy. So back in the day, Napster kind of got popular, and also a lot of P2P file sharing protocols. So if you wanted to torrent something or get free music, really started to get into the zeitgeist, and it was, hey, check out Napster, blah, 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 blah. And shortly after Pirate Bay came into being, who's used Pirate Bay before? Promise. We're not recording this, by the way. I have a memory of my uncle sitting me down going, you got to check out this website, and showing me Pirate Bay when I was probably in middle school. So it started early, guys. But after the Pirate Bay went live, it got even bigger, right? It was much easier to steal movies and TV shows. You'd put uTorrent on your computer, whatever it ended up being. And come 2006, 2009, we started to see you wouldn't download a car clips before you watched a movie that you rented from the movie store or whatever it might be, in trailers. And yeah, overall piracy crackdown. People started to get cease and desist letters in their mail. I know my parents did at one point. And well, okay, I can tell a quick story. And if my mom's watching the live stream, she's gonna love it. So when I was maybe like 8th grade or something like that, we got a letter in the mail, a cease and desist, and then we started getting them via email, and I'd get yelled at about them. Knew my mom's email password, logged in, set up a forward rule to myself, and then sent them all to the trash, and eventually started using my neighbor's Wi-Fi, but that's a whole nother story. So I will kick it over to JP now.
Yeah. So then after that, in 2009 to 2011, we got tools like Sickbeard and Couch Potato get released. These used Usenet, which is more quieter, faster way of doing this. And the big thing that these applications brought were automation pipelines. So instead of manually searching for the movie that you want, then clicking download, waiting a bit and hoping that actually is the movie, you would just search the movie and everything would happen in the background. Then 2012, 2014, we got file site hosts or file hosting sites like Mega Upload. Now you wouldn't even need a torrent client. You could just go to the website and download the movie directly, which is awesome. Then they got seized by the Department of Justice and the FBI, so not awesome. And that kind of made everyone go back towards a more again. And then 2013 to 2016, the R era begins. That's when the tool NZB Drone gets changed to Sonarr through a crowdsourced naming contest, actually. But that was basically another Usenet application to help download shows specifically. After that, we got tools like Radarr and LiDAR, which are for movies and music. And what these apps really brought were making automation the sort of standard for piracy, making everything super simple. And so now in the modern day with Docker, things are super simple. I think you could just Google how steal movies, and then you could just get a Docker compose file and be up and running in like 2 minutes. So that was super awesome. So we're going to take a look at the overall stack for the Servarr applications. So with hardware, super lightweight. You can honestly use a Raspberry Pi if you wanted to, as long as you attach storage to it. Personally, I have a B-Link mini PC at home with like 20 terabytes just plugged into it. I think you have a crazy...
Yeah, I'm Synology with the mix of Proxmox and stuff like that to host all this. So.
Yeah, so because it's Docker, you can honestly host this on anything you want. You can have a crazy setup, but all you really need is a computer plus storage. And then, so Docker made all of this very trivial and easy. As long as you have that Docker compose file, fill out some environmental variables, and then you're up and running in a couple seconds. In terms of the actual applications that you're running, there's the R family right there. in order from left to right, top to bottom. We have Sonarr, which is for shows, Radarr's for movies, LiDAR's for music, and then Radarr is for books. So nice, awesome. These handle monitoring and for new requests and movies. So everything here is interactable through an API, and it's scriptable, so it's great for automation, and it's also really good for attackers if you can get into it. Next, we have the download clients. So we have NZBGet for things like Usenet, and then qBittorrent for torrent. Probably won't talk about torrent too much, but there will be a slide for it there. What these do is they receive jobs from the Servarr stack, and that's what pulls down the contents. Then we have media servers. Who here has Plex at home? Okay, so then everyone here basically knows what it is, but the media servers basically let you have like Netflix at home for all of your self-stored content. You can have Plex Plex is the closed source version of it, and then there's also an open source version of it called Jellyfin. Does anyone use Jellyfin? Do you like it more than Plex, or was it just the first one you used? Oh. Oh, okay. Well. I didn't know that. Okay.
We're gonna talk to you when
Yeah, as soon as this talk's over, I want to talk to you. Oh yeah, he's just saying that Jellyfin basically has better support for transcoding. And don't you have to pay to transcode with Plex? I think.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't think so.
All right. Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah.
No, you're good.
Oh yeah. Okay. So now let's actually take a look at what the stack looks like. So the average Servarr stack looks like this. In the middle is the main application, in this case Radarr. They directly go to Radarr or use a request portal like Overseer. This is what Overseer looks like. You set this up if you have family members or spouses who want to download movies, but you don't want to give them access to it, and you also don't want to play the telephone game of when your parents call you because their computer's not working. So this is a super simple way of doing it.
It's gonna happen anyways, but
Yeah,
this makes
yeah.
it a little easier.
Yeah. So you just give them access to this. Here they looked up the horrible movie. They select what quality you want it. So like, what, 720p here. Then they hit request. Automatically, all of this data is going to be sent back into Radarr. Radar's going to import it, grab down the metadata, figure out what quality you wanted it, and then it's going to start searching for it. The way it does that is by talking to an indexer, or in this case, an indexer manager called Prowler. We'll cover indexers in more detail in like 2 seconds, but basically these are the tools that are going to search for that content available, in this case via Usenet. So here, this is what Prowler looks like, by the way. Once it's sent over the movie that it's trying to find, Prowler is going to search for it and have a list of all of the matched releases. So here they are in like different profiles or different quality settings, basically. So I mentioned this is the indexer and it's using Usenet, but really quick, I'm going to kick it back over to Nicholas and we're going to cover what that is.
Yeah. So at this point, right, we're just kind of describing a standard piracy stack. So the things that JP showed off, Overseer is a front end for your family or whatever it might be. Radarr is simply kind of the orchestration application. Prowler stores places you're going to search for content. It's the equivalent of taking a bunch of torrent search engines or something and pointing your application at that. But in our case, right, and for JP and I, we use Usenet pretty heavily. Who's familiar with old Usenet, like text boards, stuff like that? Okay, so I am not. So nobody nerd snipe me. I only know how to use it to steal stuff. I'm gonna be honest. So in the modern, like I'm sure text boards in some way, shape, or form still exist, but the primary use case, from my understanding, nowadays is to host, upload, host, and download pirated content for the most part. So across the board, you take a look at the next slide here. Usenet providers actually store and manage the content that somebody uploads. So if I want a movie or a TV show, or I want to share that with people, that's going to go onto a Usenet provider. This diagram looks insane. It is. Basically, it's just showing the actual providers of Usenet nowadays. Most of them are owned by large backbones, and then they're white labeled and resold and things like that. But it's basically somebody who's selling access to an NTP, so you can connect up to it and actually receive and push content and things like that. So there's the really popular ones on here, and I know it's tiny. Equa is a really popular one. In the previous slide, I showed off a couple of other ones. All of these cost money. So Equa, for example, is $90 a year. You get access, unlimited speeds, as far as I know, and I think it's like 10 years of retention for files. So real quick, then what I will talk about here is the actual upload process of content and why Usenet is so popular, I guess. So with torrents, and I'm bite my tongue, not talk about it too much, but you depend on other people to send the content back to you. You have to do peer-to-peer sharing. With Usenet, a file is split and spread across multiple servers as chunks of data. So back in the day, right, when people wanted to share an updated version of SED or some random binary on Usenet, you either had to, well, you had to go to a meetup and get it off a floppy disk and then trade them back and forth and things like that. And then people eventually figured out I can split the chunks of these files into multiple like text blobs, encoded text blobs. I can pull them all down individually and reconstruct them into one. It's really good for stealing movies too, and it's kind of how the Usenet provider, you send them a file, it gets split into chunks, encoded, and placed in files that basically are named nothing. It's just random strings, and it makes it very easy for the Usenet provider to have plausible deniability, basically. If you want to upload something today to Usenet, you need to have access to that Usenet provider, and then you can use a tool like Niu. I hope I'm saying it right. I think it's an anime thing. When I looked it up, I got a bunch of random pictures. But really, you can authenticate to Usenet, push a file. It does all the splitting and placing of the files on the servers, and then it becomes available to other people. But because it is in these random chunked files on a server, you need to know where to get those files from. So anybody who did binary sharing back in the day through Usenet, tons of failures. You try to grab each individual chunk, but there might be 100 of them based on the file size limitation of those chunks. So in I believe it was like 2004, Newsbin invented a file called the NZB file. It's basically a XML file that contains pointers to the locations of these files, so you can just put the NZB file in your download client. There were CLI download clients for this as well, I think, at some point, and they probably still exist. But and then it would go out and it would grab each file individually, reconstruct them. Indexers' jobs are to store and process those NZB files. These, again, cost money. NZB Geek, Drunken Slug, Dog NZB are some of them. I'll show you this weird graph again that you probably can't read from sitting in the back. But basically, there's like 20-ish of them. You pay money to get access, and they do a good job at indexing the locations of files. So I grab an NZB file that says I'm trying to watch source code. It'll point me at the chunks on the Usenet server, and then my download client that JP will talk about will actually index and or download and do all of that stuff. I'm an NZB Geek guy. I think you were telling me earlier you have a few of these in play, but NZB Geek down in the right, you'll see it's the success rate of these. NZB Geek is kind of the most reliable on the market right now. And then finally, like I was talking about, we have actual parsing of that NZB file that we were talking about, and then the downloading of the content, and then reconstruction of the content. So think MP4 file that's split into 100 different pieces, and then your download client takes that NZB, it goes and gets the 100 pieces, reconstructs it into one, and there's your movie. Now back to JP.
Yeah, there we go. So, like we were saying before, Radarr talks to Prowler. Prowler is the indexer manager that's actually going to find a matching release for the movie that you want, then it's going to grab that NZB file and send it back to Radarr. Once Radarr has it, it sends it over to the download client. In this case, it's NZB get. So here we see it's downloading the movie source code. It's only going to take like 3-ish minutes for 4 gigabytes through the NZB or through the NNTP protocol, so that's actually not that bad. Basically, NZB gets that NZB get gets the NZB file, which again is just an XML file with all of the post IDs pointing towards the different shards. It's going to download all of them, rebuild the file back together, and then it's going to send it over to a shared folder that your Plex server sees. So as soon as that download's done, it's going to notify Radarr that it's done. Radarr tells Plex that the movie's available. It's going to refresh your library, and then the user can just watch the movie at the end. So from end to end, the workflow is pretty simple. From the user's perspective, all they did was look up a movie and hit request. But in the background, the user makes the request, the home lab searches for the content, finds a match, pulls down the NZB file, downloads all the chunks, puts it back together, and then drops it over in Plex. So ideally, you just have to set this pipeline up once, and then you never have to look at it again. That's assuming nothing breaks, which of course doesn't really happen. Then
the fun of a home lab.
Yeah, I guess.
Maybe somebody's thinking, why didn't you talk about torrents? I don't like torrents. No, so I think probably as we were going about the Usenet, boring Usenet explanation, it seemed like, why would you do this crazy, complicated, weird process nowadays? Or why would you leverage this strange setup? Well, like I mentioned, the Usenet providers themselves have a lot of plausible deniability for storing the files, so the risk of getting a file taken down is extremely low. There have been requests to strike or remove copyrighted material, but I think in a lot of cases, one, they're all like in the Netherlands and they go, screw you, I'm not listening. But in addition to it, they can't even figure out where the files are. They have no proof that it exists on their server because it's just a bunch of blocks of another seeder to exist to provide you with that content. If it's an old, obscure movie, chances of you properly or successfully torrenting that file are extremely low, right? Usenet has like 10-year retention rates. It's really good at holding on to this content. In addition, torrents are really easy to detect from an ISP level. So if you guys probably went home right now and tried to torrent like Interstellar, they're great at doing that. And so people have started to introduce VPNs into the process. It adds complexity. You're paying them. NordVPN is probably some state-sponsored data collection. Yeah, so torrents are still around, but reliability-wise and just for like speed of execution and download, Usenet is awesome. Cool. So we're going to pivot. That's just kind of the stack itself. I'm going to talk about Servarr applications a little bit. So back, JP had mentioned it, NZB Drone, a project came onto the scene. NZB Drone was primarily for TV and TV recording and things like that, but you could also rip content through it. But then in around 2014, it was renamed to Sonarr. JP mentioned, I actually didn't know this until you told me today, they actually had a big contest and Sonarr is what won. So if you look back in the GitHub issues and things like that. And from there, what ended up happening were people said, I don't want to just download TV shows. I want to watch movies. I want to do music and blah, 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 blah. And so people just kept forking Sonarr. So Sonarr was forked. It was turned into Radarr. Then LiDAR for music. Prowlar and Redarr came quickly after that. And then they kind of reworked the underlying code base. And today it's super easy to set up and like stand up in your home lab really, really quickly. Now, there's a problem with this, or a couple. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, I'm a little dyslexic, just make sure I'm not missing that. LiDAR, the word for light, is the one for the sound files, and Sonarr, the one for sound, is the one for the visual files.
Again, they crowdsourced the naming convention.
It was the whole pirate phase, so I assume that they were like viable candidates.
Yeah.
So, just make sure I'm not missing that.
No.
You're good,
You're on point.
Did not even think about that.
Yeah,
So.
I think there were 100.
Both of those are perfect names.
Yes, yeah.
Radar's for movies, and then they added an E to it for Radarr, so I don't.
Oh yeah, they sometimes do ARR, sometimes they do ERR. It gets weird, but anyways, they're all in the. No, you're good. They're all in the Servarr family, and or all of these apps are in the Servarr family. The pink one, you guys can figure out what it is. I'm not gonna say anything. You'll see it from time to time. But they all share 70 original kind of code base. So a lot of the routing and things like that all depend on an NZB drone like core library. And what they did was instead of creating a shared library that they would all leverage and then they could build this other 30-ish% of the application on top of it and just import NZB drone, instead they just forked off of Sonarr and then just kept doing that, and every time code has to be updated in NZB drone, it has to be cherry picked out into each individual Servarr application. So from a development standpoint, that's like a nightmare. But they've had conversations about it in the GitHub issues and things, and they're like, yeah, man, I do this for free. I'm not doing that. Patching is hard, and underlying issues in NZB drone basically affect all of the applications. So if you can find a vulnerability in NZB drone itself, it's going to apply to all of the Servarr apps. And then on top of it, if you find it Servarr like family application about it, patching it is extremely hard because the Sonarr dev, who is the kind of primary main application, they all kind of stem from there. It's the most mature project. They have to then go reach out to the Radarr dev and things like that to actually facilitate that patching. We'll talk about it more and more, but there's an extremely high attacker ROI here if you can find this out on the internet, because it doesn't just apply to a small subset of apps. You find something in one, it applies to all of them, and there's a ton of cool stuff stored in these Servarr applications.
Yeah, so taking a step back, we're going to talk about a setting called disabled for local addresses, or DFLA. So on setup, a brand new Servarr application is going to force you to set up authentication before you can start accessing it. You can choose whether you want basic auth or a login page, and then for authentication required, for some reason, you can either set it to yes, always authenticate, or disable for local addresses. So if you're coming from your own home network, you don't have to authenticate, which is great because these applications were intended to just be stored on a homelab. But for some reason, people started putting them on the internet, which is a super great idea. So that seems standard, but back in the day, before this update, on a fresh install of a server app, there was like no authentication required. You actually had to dig through the settings to turn on using a username and password. So then like 2 or 3 years ago, they pushed out an update to all the users saying, no, if you want to use it, you have to set up authentication. So for the most part, people didn't really care about it. They probably just set up like disable for local addresses. Then they put a random username, random password, never probably had to use it because they're only ever coming from their home lab environments. Before this change, there was just thousands of Radarrs and Sonarr instances on the internet that had no authentication. So, you know, everyone kind of had access to it no matter what. And then even like, sorry, quick tangent, when they pushed out this update, there was probably a week where if someone was like a big a-hole, they could have just set admin passwords for everybody. It doesn't look like anybody did that, but maybe missed opportunity or something. But DFLA was basically a way to help set up security, even for the lazy people who don't want to actually authenticate every single time. But this does create like this was like a middle ground for those users that are lazy and didn't want to auth every single time. But this does create a single point of failure for us, where this option is available for one of them, and because they all share the same code base, it's an option for all of them. Odds are a lot of these users set this setting up. And the main issue with that is it basically relies if the app can correctly identify if you're coming from local network or not, it lets you bypass authentication. So if you can find a way to spoof your source IP, you get to bypass authentication, and that's kind of what you can do. So here we have a vulnerable version of Radarr stood up. Gonna hit pause right there. So we're trying to hit the initialize.json endpoint, and it doesn't let us because we are correctly not coming from localhost. Then we kind of just tell it we are by setting the x forwarded for header to localhost, and it says, okay, you're coming from local network. So it actually returns the full JSON output. And inside this, the one thing that's redacted, because this may or may not be my Radarr instance at home, it's the API key right there. And for some reason, that API key actually gives you administrative access to the entire application. So that's pretty cool. And because it works on Radarr, it works on Sonarr and LiDAR and Radarr and all of them. So just by hitting a random endpoint and lying from where we're coming from, you get admin access to the whole app.
All right. Who knows this movie off the top of their head? Okay, cool. I've shown this slide to people, and they're like, I don't know what that's, Men in Black. So Everybody's probably wondering what the hell is with initialize.json. I don't think I've ever done a web app pen test in my life, and I can just hit an endpoint and get the root cred for the app just from a JSON file. It's actually pretty weird, and this is just a quick aside on it. It was actually added and is dynamically generated for the application because of this sharding of Servarr apps. So to provide information about the internal APIs and provide authentication to the front end app itself, that initialize.json endpoint is hit by the app, the front end of the app, and that API key is used as a cookie as you navigate the application. And in addition to it, because different Servarr applications would have different API endpoint naming schemes, one might be on v3 and v5 or something like that, it would automatically, or in that JSON file, it would tell you which API you needed to hit and interact with and stuff. It was basically, I'm an open source dev, I need to find a solution that works for all of these downstream projects, and so they added this. Now, should it? Probably not, but it is. Now, I'm going to get really boring again with some code on why this vuln actually works. James Kettle talked a lot of, I don't remember the name of his talk, but kind of leveraging, X-forwarded for headers to bypass authentication in certain cases or access sensitive endpoints. And so the code or the flaw here is basically the same. All the Servarr apps and NZB drone itself is based on .NET. And so this was the code when the vulnerability was discovered. Basically, right, they added a functionality to accept the value of an X-forwarded for header. And what they do is they clear trusted networks and trusted proxies. So the point of this was to support the usage of a transparent reverse proxy in front of the application. So if I was sending an X-forwarded for header and needed to support the ability to have a reverse proxy like Traffic or something or Nginx to forward that header on. What ends up happening, however, is in this middleware pipeline this is like a 1,000-line file or whatever. If you actually go and look at it, it pulls in the use forwarded for headers and sets a value of the remote IP address you're coming from based on the contents of that X forwarded for header instead of reading it from your actual request. As you get later on in the code, right, I'm sure somebody has spotted this. I'm at the top on line 1 saying this is, I'm reading in what the remote IP is, and then we're doing auth checks towards the bottom. So what actually ends up happening when you bypass auth this way is it reads in the remote IP and it considers the remote IP to be the contents of that X forwarded for header. It checks if it's a local address, and if it is and DFLA is turned on, you bypass auth. So pretty kind of a simple screw up for the most part. I'm not a .NET developer, and so if I explained any of that wrong, yell at me. Anyways, pretty kind of simple thing. I think it was really meant to, they monkey patched all this in to support the DFLA stuff when they added it back in the day. But yeah, let's hop over to the fun stuff, I think is what...
What would you do if you had access to 8 petabytes of movies, basically? I'll preface this by saying we did not steal anything. I want to make that very clear. We just looked. So the plan was to scan the internet, collect some stats, and kind of figure out how many of these are actually on the internet. In our defense, this was too good of an opportunity to ignore after finding the bypass. The goal here wasn't theft, just kind of understanding the modern piracy landscape and seeing what what pirates are doing, because there are no pirates here. And kind of just saying what their setups are. Are they using Usenet? Are they still on torrent? What kind of indexers are they using? Mostly, we just wanted to see how many Servarr apps are out there, how many are vulnerable, who has the biggest libraries, that kind of stuff.
I'll mention something real quick. So all of these applications have it's just a front end interacting with an API, and they publish a Swagger definition for all of it. So basically, once you have this API key, you can hit every endpoint to perform every action or just do a read of the data out of it. So I can go to the API and ask for what movies are on here, what are their sizes, what's the configuration of this, as context on how we pulled this information after grabbing the key.
So, first step, we had to figure out what's actually out there. Not about what's exploitable, just in terms of visibility. So Sonarr and Radarr kind of dominate the landscape. That makes sense. It's movies and shows. That's what people want. Next is Prowlar, then Redarr, then LiDAR, and then Wisper. We're not going to explain what Wisper is, but you can Google it. Sonarr and Redarr, again, that makes sense. Movies and TVs probably have the highest adoption. Prowlar, widely used, but still less exposed. I think we have our own theories on why that would be.
We generally think that people are sharing access to their indexers that are stored in Prowlar, so your friends can all use your API keys, or people can pool everything together and kind of share that out. It's still really weird that it's on the internet, but that's probably why it's coming in third for the most part.
It's also probably user error. I can imagine someone just following a YouTube tutorial, putting up all of these services through Docker, and then exposing all of them. That seems obvious, I think. Next is Redarr, which RIP because it is no longer supported. I think it's deprecated. The devs just decided they're not going to maintain it, but that's fine. You should always support paperback authors anyway, unless you're in college. Next is LiDAR, which I think is the biggest indicator that piracy is super easy to use. So, and it's cheap compared to having $90 worth of subscriptions to watch movies and TV shows. So I think it kind of makes sense that the LiDAR is probably the smallest one. Share a sense of the idea. To actually find these, we did use a mix of different search engines like Shodan, Census, FOFA, and then other really sketchy services. But all right, in terms of the top movies, here we have the top 10 that we found from left to right, top to bottom. There's some good movies on here, and then there's also Deadpool and Wolverine.
I wanted to do that joke, but he just took it, whatever. Yeah, so nothing here terribly surprising. I will say we collected these stats most recently, maybe like a month ago or something like that. So it's probably very representative of what's popular in the world anyways, for the most part. One of the interesting things to call out here that I actually didn't realize until a couple of days ago, Radarr natively has the ability to select lists that you want to reference to download content. One of the default ones from Radarr is to get the latest movies as they're coming out, and so that's probably what people are doing. They're just turning it on to grab stuff as it hits streaming services. Outside of that, nothing crazy. It's weird. Dune 2 is there's more Dune 2s than Dune 1, but a question that'll never be answered. From TV show perspective, awesome. I think the things to call out here that you guys will notice right away, they're all from different streaming services, and there are no shows produced by Netflix up here. But this like quick math in our head, this is $90 worth of streaming services a month. So it generally makes sense that people would not want to pay that, and most of these shows are pretty good. So, do you have any other notes on this one?
I just really like Severance. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I really like Silo, so I was happy to see the stats here. From a how are people downloading stuff in general? We were very surprised to find that torrents are still more popular than Usenet, probably because torrents are free and Usenet is not. But I'm a huge Usenet user, haha, and both JP and I are. I guess out of curiosity, again, not being recorded, anybody who steals content, anybody using Usenet actively for that? Respect. All right. It seemed to be mostly torrents, and definitely was a little surprised by that. As for download clients specifically, for torrents, we saw qBittorrent primarily. If you look at a lot of the Synology or Unraid built-in packages, qBittorrent is the first one you can get. It's also relatively functional and mature as an application. There's no web UI by default exposed, so I would have loved to do more research into popping qBittorrent, but Deluge is the only one that has a native web UI as far as I know. Coming in first for Usenet download clients, SAB NZB. I'm a big NZB Git guy. Okay, but yeah, I think we need to.
What do you mean by that? Okay.
If it works, it works, I guess. Oh, okay.
We say since Torque doesn't have a web server, I guess by
Might be wrong. It does? Okay. Gotcha.
Most installations that I'm aware of have it turned on.
Okay.
You can run it headless effectively.
Yeah, and my understanding was they just did it headless most of the time locally on the. Yeah. Okay. Cool, cool. Gotcha. Okay. Mhm. Gotcha.
And just to clarify, like these stats aren't from what we found that was exposed on the internet. It's what download clients were connected to
Or
the Servarr app that
Yep.
was exposed on.
Yep. Exactly. Yep. From a who knows this movie? That guy's cool. I don't know. John Wick 4. I won't dwell on this one too much, but yeah, Pirate Bay still is winning across the board. So of all of the indexers and trackers that we looked at, Pirate Bay is still the most used tracker amongst thieves. NZB Geek coming in first for Usenet indexers. Like I said, I'm a NZB Geek guy. The rest of them are just kind of random torrent services, and Dog NZB is one of the other NZB providers. I think nothing terribly surprising here. On to probably our favorite slide, however, is the whales.
Yeah, so this is what I was most excited about when we first started this project. We're talking about like hundreds of terabytes worth of content, and so the numbers that are up here aren't how much storage they have total. That's how much storage is taken up by their media, so it's kind of insane. Our IT guy Pete had someone trying to sell him half a petabyte, and just to support the appliance, he needed two 20 amp outlets to do it. So yeah, kind of insane. Just looking at movies here, out of the top 10 home labs that we found combined, they made up about 1.5 petabytes. And one guy by himself in Jersey is taking up 441 terabytes of movies. His basement must smell so fucking bad, but and I wish his Sonarr instance was also public so we could have gotten stats on that, but it wasn't, alas. I will say he has recently taken down his Radarr. I don't know if it's because it got patched or maybe from our research. I don't know, but if you're watching this at home, you know who you are, man from New Jersey. And then for Sonarr, for the shows, the top 10 home labs was only about 1.3 petabytes, and the highest one we found was in the UK, about quarter of a petabyte. I definitely thought that the show libraries would be bigger just out of quantity because, you know, shows have more media. It's per seasons, per episodes. Some shows are really big. Sometimes you give your fiance access to Overseer and they download 90 gigabytes worth of Little House on the Prairie. That can happen, but our IT guy P kind of explained that because movies are more likely to be stored in 4K or come in higher quality than TV rips, it's more about quality of the content than the numbers. So that's kind of why movies are dwarfing Sonarr in terms of how much storage they take up.
Real quick before we hop over. We have these stats on some of the other Servarr applications. We're still working on consolidating that data just because we've gotten it so recently, I'd say, and it's very hard to parse unstructured API JSON that's just thrown out and we kind of broadly collected. But the size of the libraries or the biggest libraries kind of go in line with the type of or the popularity of the Servarr app. So LiDAR, again, in very low use.
Like 2 terabytes was the biggest library
Yeah.
we found, which is still a lot for like MP3s.
What was the top one that we saw today, artist-wise?
It was various artists.
Oh, yeah.
Songs have a bunch of people, but other than that, I think it was literally Elton John.
Yeah, Elton John. I think, stuff is still being downloaded for music, but I don't even think it's getting uploaded at the rate it used to after Spotify became much harder to rip from and things like that. So Sonarr and Radarr dominates. Hopefully, if you guys come see us at another presentation at some point, we'll have a lot more stats in here, but overall, the whales are kind of the cool outliers that in another version or another world, I would probably hunt down and figure out exactly who they are. And
So, let me hit pause on that real quick. Wait for it. There we go. Okay, so we've shown that with this vulnerability that we found, we can grab that admin API key. from a vulnerable Servarr instance. We also mentioned that using that API key, you can't actually get any of the sensitive information out of it. You can query what the name of the indexers are. You can query the name of the download client, but you don't actually get the creds or the paid keys for that. So, I mean, in real life, you know, if this was a pen test, they'd probably say information disclosure, closed as risk accepted, whatever. But then we started looking a little bit deeper, and in the API, we found that there is an endpoint that you can download a DB backup of the entire application.
And they run recurringly. So
Yes.
these backups happen.
Like almost every day. You can also force it to back up right away. You can only download these backups if you're coming from localhost. Really cool thing about the vulnerability we found. So in order, if you hit the endpoint, the initialize.json endpoint, grab that API key, use the vulnerability again to hit the DB backup endpoint, pull that down. All the secrets there are stored in clear text, basically. So after combining the auth bypass and the key, that means we can pull the DB down remotely, get the password for the download client, get the API keys that all cost money, and you also get the hash for the administrative account. Again, this is an example one. Yeah, that is probably mine, but that's okay. But really quickly, so yeah, in this POC, like I said, we're just hitting the endpoint or the initialize.json endpoint, grabbing that API key, downloading the backup, and then extracting everything from the database, basically. Why does this actually matter?
JP's favorite slide. It's taken at like 11 p.m. at CypherCon last year of him playing a DS at a table. So in addition to pulling that backup, like who cares? We got movie stats, that sort of thing. Well, like I've been mentioning, Usenet credentials and indexers cost money. And so when we parse the data, we didn't take the keys, but you can see what indexer is provisioned. We were looking at maybe around $10,000 worth of, and it spans multiple indexers and even indexers that are invite only. So there's a ton of keys you can grab here. In addition, horizontal movement becomes super easy. So if you have a Radarr instance that you pop, it's usually going to be hooked up to Overseer. Because it's hooked up to Overseer, you have an admin API key to it, or vice versa or the other way around in some cases, which this is kind of the impetus of the entire title of the talk. If you have Plex integrated, which is pretty common, if you download a movie, you want Plex to automatically refresh to notice that movie was downloaded. There's a static API key that gets stored in there. And so theoretically, if you go into... if you grab that API key, they also have Plex on the internet, which 99% of the time they're going to. You can use that key to log into Plex and download pirated content. So in theory, instead of getting stuff from Usenet or torrents, if you went and exploited this, you could actually download other people's movies that they've already stolen for you. And then finally, and the thing that I think we really wanted to do and we didn't, is with the admin access, you can wipe out entire libraries and theoretically add Hackers as the only movie in there and things like that. Yeah, Sonarr. And so doing that across the board for all of these instances, probably wouldn't end most people's days. The half a petabyte guy, he'd probably, I don't even know. But yeah. So pretty high impact here. In addition, there's other funky stuff you can do. But from a reporting standpoint, so we reached out. This is, again, an open source application. If you look at the commits, it's basically maintained by 2 or 3 guys, and we're big users of both of these apps. So wanted to be super respectful about this. I reached out to them they had a security tab on GitHub with like a email address for just general Servarr vulnerabilities. Emailed them, nothing back. Followed up again. It's like what Will and I were trying to get creds out of a customer to test their web app, that sort of thing. So I'm very good at it. And finally, it's 2025, so you have to report security vulnerabilities through Discord. I DM'd the main developer in there, and he said, "Yeah, we're aware of it. We're working on a fix." While we were actively trying to collect videos and screenshots for this, I stood up a separate Radarr instance to just kind of test against and stuff, and I couldn't exploit the vulnerability. And I was like, what the hell is going on? we go look at the code. They actually shadow patched it. And I got confirmation of it in a slide we'll look at here. I expected it to be a huge code change for them. They actually just they stripped away the known networks and known proxies lines and added known, or what do they call it? Known networks. And basically they're saying that we'll only trust the contents of the x-forwarded-for header from local IP addresses in the first place. So that still supports reverse proxies while also kind of maintaining the functionality and things like that. So this is kind of comms. Again, one of the things that we did find out as we were talking through this, and for any Servarr users in here, they know who's updating, I guess, and there is a statistics collection that happens in these Servarr apps, so we both went and unchecked a box hidden in the settings pretty quick. But basically they rolled it out, and they were waiting to see how many people updated before they actually announced the vulnerability. We're trying to wait on submitting to MITRE for anything just yet, just so they get a chance to push this out across the board. Who cares? It's fine waiting for it, but definitely in kind of close comms with these guys to see what they want to do, and given the nature of the fragmented Servarr apps, like giving them the opportunity to get all those other guys in line is probably really important as well. Some takeaways. Don't steal movies, guys. No, just don't put your shit on the internet if you don't have to, basically. There's really not a great reason to put any of this on the internet. But
unless you're selling access to it to random people.
Yeah, but still, yeah. And again, I'll say, and kind of just drilled in on this for the past couple sides, but open source maintainers have it rough, especially with applications with this many users. Just on the internet alone, we were looking at like 30,000 of these instances across all the Servarr apps. That's not including the people who have it running inside of their house. So this is a dude with a Lego Batman logo on his Discord that I think just maintains it in his own free time along with 5 or 6 other guys. So definitely tough, especially in this situation, trying to make it work. And then finally, more research to be done. Abilities and like self-hosted apps and things like that. It's a lot of SSRF stuff. We've kind of been too lazy to report it just yet, but we're definitely working on it, and hopefully it'll be in kind of upcoming slide decks. JP, anything to note on this one?
Yeah, just a couple things. For the open source maintainers have it rough. If you ever don't feel bad for them, I think everyone here should go to the Sonarr project on GitHub and go to the open people basically asking them to turn off enforcing authentication, and then you realize how people can get popped. The other thing I want to mention is I think it was LastPass literally got popped because their sysadmin had Plex running a vulnerable version. So the attack surface here is actually a lot bigger than people would think. I don't think people are threat modeling what their sysadmin has in their home lab as part of their company's attack surface, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. But yeah, that's it.
Definitely. And yeah, quick credits. This took me way too long to make, but really appreciate. Really appreciate you guys coming, and thank you for the time. And if anybody has any questions, we're open to them. So, awesome. Cool. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this is a really good question it's going above my knowledge level. Thank you, Steven, for doing this to me. No. So I guess for live stream viewers, Steven asked how that NZB file that we talked about updates and changes over time as files move around. I don't know. I'm assuming in some way, shape, or form the indexer manages that and those files get updated. Alternatively, because these servers storing these files are huge and they have like 10 to 12 year retention rates, I'm pretty sure they just let them sit, the chunks.
I think there is propagation, so that even if only one provider has like all of the chunk, when you're downloading something and you have multiple providers set up in NZBGet, it can use them in parallel to sort of download the file faster.
Yeah, definitely. But again, my understanding of NNTP is not like great, so it's hard for me to say exactly like what's going on there. I haven't, probably have, but I can't off the top of my head. Like if I had to look at that XML file and understand deeply how it works, it's So, yeah.
Just talking about like the preference for Usenet over torrent, I was always curious, like, what's the pirates, not yours, the pirates' motivation for paying for multiple services that are primarily used for piracy, which feels like tying your financial information and more identifiable information to, known shady stuff, as opposed to the more anonymous, go to Pirate Bay, torrent it for 5 minutes, turn it off.
It's a great question. So one, I'll say I got very lucky with NZB Geek when I first found out about it. They had a lifetime pass, and I could give them an Amazon gift card that I went and bought from CVS or something like that when I was in high school. I believe most of them support BTC and stuff like that, but also natively in themselves, they're not illegal to use. I guess like to sign up for it, it doesn't mean you're taking pirated content. So it definitely does not it reduces your anonymity level a bit by leveraging the services, but the quality and speed at which you get the content goes up significantly. With torrents, I'm not super well versed in seed boxes and things like that, but I know that there are paid trackers as well with torrents that people who are pirating large amounts of media over torrents or P2P actively use to actually get that content at a more reliable rate. Yeah, it's a good question, but JP has any notes?
Just something to mention that I've kind of forgot to bring up, but people who do this are probably kind of very committed to it. So when we were doing our research, we found even though there was more people using torrent than Usenet, there was like a significant number of them that were actually leveraging both. So they're still paying for it. What they're probably doing is they want to request for this media. If it either takes too long to download or it doesn't exist through one provider, they'll switch over to using torrent instead. So, I mean, there's probably trade-offs there, but yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yes. So Sonarr received it first, and then I think within like 2 days we started seeing it in Radarr and Prowler. I haven't seen it in LiDAR yet, and unfortunately Radarr is deprecated, so RIP. No one's ever going to touch that anymore, which means my Radarr thing doesn't work anymore. And then Wispar, I don't know. I don't go to that GitHub page, so.
Any other questions?
I got this. I mean, I think we both have stories, so we're probably going to take turns. Yeah. So when you're requesting it, let me go back here. And I know you have something to say for this too. So when the user's requesting it, they request a specific quality profile. And then here in Prowler, I wish I could kind of zoom in on it. You can see from the file names, you can kind of guess the source at which they're grabbing it. So some of these are like Blu-ray rips. Some of them are web downloads from streaming sites. For the most part, you can trust these. I will say I've had times where like I wanted to see like a season of Dexter, and instead it was like a YouTube Let's Play of Super Mario Galaxy somehow.
True story.
True story, yeah. And also like, yeah, it's like LimeWire and shit. But there's other times where like you can select the quality of what you want from a specific profile. It's actually very like complicated how specific the media you want is. So if a movie comes out but it hasn't come out on digital release, people are probably still uploading it to Usenet, and it's tagged as a cam rip instead. So it's like someone literally just recording it in the theater. You can get it through here. I don't know why you would watch a cam rip in the first place, but maybe you just, I don't know, maybe it's like an anime movie that won't come out for another 6 months. But for the most part, I probably had maybe like 2 instances in my life where the movie I wanted wasn't the quality I wanted, or it wasn't the content itself. There is one thing that I keep having, and my fiance is not happy about it. Sometimes we'll get a movie and it's just in German for some reason, and like neither of us speak German, so not really what we wanted out of it. But yeah, yeah. So yes, and there's other. We didn't talk about Bazaar, I think. Yeah, there's like other indexers to specifically grab subtitles or audio tracks. One really quick example, Sonarr. A lot of people have two versions of Sonarr set up. They have a Sonarr dedicated for media in their original language, and then they have one specifically for like subs and dubs of either like anime or other foreign language content. Just because it gets really complicated, you'll download something like if you watched I don't know how to say it. What's the Money Heist? Sorry, it's Casa de Papel in Spanish. But when you download that, if you specify you want the movie or you want the show in its original quality, but your own native language is English, it'll try to source shows in Spanish. You get the English subs, but it can also come with the audio track for your specified language. It's not always great at specifying that, which is why sometimes I get Dexter in German, but that's fine.
Yeah, and I don't want to nerd out too much on this, but we can talk afterwards. There's a whole community dedicated to the, I would say, profiling media, so the exact encoding type, resolution, like there are guys, and then based on the streaming service it was ripped from and things like that. So, and in addition here, you'll see JP, the screenshot from JP shows a number of grabs.
Someone's probably instance.
And that's how many times that NZB file has been grabbed and used. This is not completely anonymous when you upload media. Very similarly to when you show, hold on, Pirate Bay, you'll see like Meatball listed next to one of the torrents. It's not completely anonymous, and these people are either trusted or they're not. And you get kind of rankings over time and things like that. I can say I've only had a few over the years that have been junk, and it's not even with I've never had something like JP's case where it's like a YouTube Let's Play. In a way, yeah. We do have a crazy evil idea to just poison all of Usenet with like Mr. Beast videos and stuff like that for new movies, but
That's a different talk.
That's maybe next year. What's up?
Number one, I don't like this image, but what's the best index?
NZB Geek, by far. Yeah.
Invite only?
No, NZB Geek is open. Drunken Slug is private and invite only. JP probably has keys he can give you though. Yeah.
So you're talking about some things you might do if you had access to the vulnerability
Mhm.
and you were acting maliciously. I was kind of wondering, what if copyright holders had access to this vulnerability? What are the kinds of things they could do?
It's a good question. It was a big fear of ours when doing this talk, and then also like choosing what to put in the slides and what not to, sort of thing. Who would get mad at us? And well, those guys can't tell on us because they're stealing stuff. Can Paramount get mad at us? No, they'd probably laugh at these guys. So it's a really good question. I think they are probably well aware of what shows are getting ripped so often. Like even though NZB Geek is like paid and stuff, I'm sure there are companies like scraping it to see where the content is coming from. I always think of a lot of video games, they have the tiny watermark in the corner where they'll show the exact version and like a hash or whatever. I'm sure that exists in some way, shape, or form somewhere here to make this a little more traceable. But
Yeah, I could be totally wrong on this because I didn't do it back then, but I think it was called RIA, the organization for copyright music. I think on Kazaa they specifically uploaded like malicious or corrupted content pretending for it to be like copyrighted music as a way of like fighting against piracy, up until the point where they started suing like individuals using like LimeWire and Napster instead of going after the platforms themselves. So if they knew about this, I don't know, this isn't like the Wild West anymore where people are uploading like malicious.exes instead of getting, I don't know, Afromance because I got high. But yeah.
yeah.
I can kind of speak to that without going into too many details. They're watching everything. like you point out, oh, I have 1.4 petabytes of data or whatever it is. That person is likely going down something, and there's no way for that person to escape. But if you're just sitting there with a couple gigabytes of stuff and you're just pulling stuff off the news groups, you're one billion at this point, as opposed to that one person who's literally at the top.
Yeah, maybe that guy in Jersey got honestly.
Yeah, that might be why it's down. Yeah.
Maybe that's why it's offline.
And I think most people in this room are at least on one list. So what's another one? What's up?
Yeah, so you engaged in this large scale scan. You develop a software package to do that. You deploy it somewhere, and you then penetrate and begin exploring networks that you weren't invited to. I'm wondering if you have anything that you'd be willing to share about what the software development process was like, and what the deployment was like, and measures or steps you took. I mean, even just the language you used.
Yeah. So it's an awesome question.
Just what you want to share.
I think we're gonna skip on that one probably, but I will. Yeah, trying to make a decision there. I will caveat in saying that there's no RCE here. We did not touch anybody's internal network, and even though we really wanted to, we did not steal keys during this process. So any of the paid keys were not touched. Right, the DB backup stuff was all on our own testing instances to verify that this is possible to work out POCs and things like that. But for the most part, or for all intents and purposes, we were just making calls to API endpoints that were anonymously accessible 2 years ago. So, and this was a much smaller, percentage of the actual instances on the internet that were vulnerable. So I'm sure there's somebody out there with a petabyte of movies sitting and we just couldn't see them, sort of thing. So, cool. Any other questions? We'll be around, so if you guys want to chat. But thank you, everybody, so much. Really appreciate it. The questions were awesome, and yeah, cool. Yeah.